and welcome to my Tokidoki Unicorno customization video. Before we get started though, I do apologize for the camera quality. This is my first video and I didn't realize how dirty my lens was, but I promise it gets better as we go, and by the time we get to painting, I figured it out. The first thing to always do when customizing is come up with a concept. I knew I wanted a carousel design, so I went to Google for inspiration and found this pretty white horse with teal and gold decoration. Now that we can get started, here is our eager participant. His name is Sam, and he is a smaller tokidoki, perfect for what we're doing. The first step is to remove the factory paint. I use 100% acetone. I dip my Q-tip in and start rubbing it off. I love this part, it's so satisfying. The blue paint was really thick, so it took a little more elbow grease. I use a tissue as I go to get any residue that's left behind. To get in the really small crevices, I use a cheap brush dipped in acetone to really get in there. All done! Now he's a weird little green blob. Time to create the carousel pole. I prepare my kebab skewer, now I want kebabs, as well as my rotary tool, a drill would also work. I'm using this small triangular bit. I line up my stick to where I want it to be and make 2 marks. Slowly and carefully I make the holes. If plastic builds up, just give it a little poke to make sure it's not too hot, and then remove it. I keep lining up the stick to make sure it fits and it's where I want it. Now it's sculpting time. I use Aves? I think that's how you say it. 2-part epoxy sculpt since it cures strong but is easy to mold. I make sure to wear gloves when mixing as recommended. As for sculpting tools, I usually use silicone-tipped clay tools as well as metal so the epoxy won't stick to them. I also make sure to use water to help with this as well as to smooth it. A small sharp knife is also super useful to cut the epoxy into sections as well as to make the smallest of details. As for my sculpting process, I time to cut the basic shape, stick it on, and then sculpt the little details. Be sure to constantly check your references to make sure it's looking how you want. I decide to not sculpt some of the elements and just paint them on later so it doesn't look too bulky. Off camera, or more like my camera died and I didn't notice, I sculpted his stand and top of the pole using the kebab stick as my base. Now I just add the little ball at the top and connect the hardened base to the hole I drilled with more epoxy. He's hardened for 24 hours now, so it's time for a primer spray. Now is a good time to mention to always do this in a well-ventilated area or outside if you can, and wear the proper respirator that has filters made for fumes. I'm using a white Rustoleum primer. There are better primers out there, but for what we're doing, this is cheap and effective. Always make sure to do a test spray on some scrap before beginning application. You have to watch the temperature and humidity and spray thin coats or you'll get some texture. Some places came out a little rough for me since it's so hot and humid and I was a little heavy-handed. Not to worry though, I just sanded it down with fine sandpaper and covered it up again with thin white gesso. Gesso? I'm not sure how to pronounce things. Now comes the fun part, the painting. I'm using student-grade acrylic paints, some Liquitex and Master's Touch. I like Liquitex since it has some flexibility when dry and won't crack. Always work lightest to darkest when painting so you don't have to worry about having to paint as many coats. This saves time and keeps everything nice and smooth. So for me, the lightest shade I mix is the white and orangey yellow to make the cream color. I also add some water to thin the paint so I don't leave brush strokes. the color is so light, I ended up having to do about 5 coats, so just be patient, or if you're like me and you can't be patient, use a hairdryer on low setting to dry coats faster. For the gold details, I'm just using this cheap craft paint. It doesn't need to be watered down since it's already so runny. This took about 3 or 4 coats. I leave the base unpainted for now since I will be holding it by that a lot and don't want to just rub it off. The teal was the hardest color for me to mix. It did not want to be the color I wanted it, and it changed a few times between coats. We're getting more detailed now, so it's time to break out my teeniest brush. mane and tail color also gave me a little fight. I kept accidentally pouring out too much paint. I also didn't thin it as much as I should have, so you can see a bit of brush texture in the final result. Don't forget the tiny pony pedicure. It's time to do the scary part. No, not more drummeling. I mean painting the eyes. I take a different tokidoki for reference and mark very lightly with a pencil where I want it to go, making sure to look at them from all sides to make sure they're even. Holding my breath, I take my smallest brush and fill it in with black. Whew, okay, all done. I let it dry a few days and now it's ready for finishing spray. Firstly, I do a coat of Rustoleum clear gloss enamel. I find the gloss is stronger than my matte spray, and when I add the matte coat over it, I get a more satin finish, like the real tokidokis. I wait a few days before the second coat, using Rustoleum matte clear enamel. Now, are you ready for the final result? Here he is before. And here's the after. I'm so happy with how it came out. It's just like what I imagined, and it was so fun to learn how to use epoxy. Now there's only one thing left to do, a cat test. This isn't food, Mom. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something new. Give that like button a boop and subscribe for more projects.